I am talking about ways to help your teen with dysphoria. Now, dysphoria was described to me by my daughter's therapist as extreme discomfort with their body, especially in relation to sexual characteristics such as breasts. I am just a mother. I am not a psychologist. I am not an expert. I'm just telling you about what has been helping and working for my daughter. The medical fraternity often say the only way to help your child with dysphoria, um, including kids who may identify as transgender and whose parents may consider them not to be transgender. And now I'm not saying every kid that identifies as transgender is not transgender. All I am saying is that many who do identify later desist or detransition, so they move away from that identity. So my experience is that that identity is not fixed. My daughter identified as transgender for 9 months and then moved away from that. She now identifies as non-binary. And so this video is to help those parents whose children are in that discovery stage. Now, if you want to know more about the nuts and bolts, please watch my video, the first in this series, Alternative to Affirmation. That one I spoke about support. This one I'm talking about bonding. Now, what I talk about in the support video is actual examples of where my daughter had particular things that she suffered in relation to her dysphoria. So, for example, her concern about her breasts and how I helped her with those without giving into the transgender type thinking. So helping her to helping relieve some of her discomfort. But along with the practical steps of taking her to get a bra fitted, there was also, and I described this in that video as well, also the moment of bonding. And Sasha Ayed, who she's amazing, if you want to have a look at her on her website, inspiredteentherapy.com, she talks about the most important thing in helping your child through this gender discovery journey is to maintain or strengthen the relationship with the child. And this is what I'm calling bonding today, and it certainly has helped in our household. What happens with these kids that identify as transgender, and I'm talking about the ones that suddenly identify out of the blue. This is the typical rapid onset gender dysphoria situation. And the parents, it just does not ring true to the parents, not because they are transphobic, but because they've never seen any indication of this in their child. And so often what happens in that situation is that it can become adversarial. So it can become about the teenager versus the parent. And when that happens, the relationships break down, and it's difficult for the teen to communicate with the parent. It's difficult for the teen, even if they change their mind and they've discovered now that identity of transgender no longer fits them, it's very difficult for the teen to then have a conversation with a parent, or even just to share the pain that they're in. Because even if they ultimately come to the realization that they are not transgender, their dysphoria can remain, their discomfort with their body can remain. And this certainly is the case with my own daughter. She still has issues and psychological pain to do with her body. So the bonding and the strengthening the relationship is really important, so that it's not them against you, it's the family or the parents working together with the teenager and helping the teenager through a difficult time. And I find that verbalizing the bonding is very useful. So what I do when I'm doing something to support my daughter or help her through a difficulty that she's having in relation to her body image issues, I will say, I know that you're struggling with, and whatever it is, I would like to help you. How would it be for you if we could perhaps explore, and then I give her whatever the option is. And so by verbalizing it, she understands my words are explaining to her that I'm there to help, I'm there to support. And I've been really pondering why this has been such a powerful way for me to help her and to strengthen our relationship. And I've recently come across a talk by Dr. Gordon Neufeld, and he talks about attachment. And he's not talking about gender issues at all, but I'll put a link to that in the below in the description. It's the best thing that I have watched in relation to this phenomena. When the child feels supported and the teenager feels supported and they feel that attachment to you. Now, I'm not using attachment in the way that psychologists do because it's got a particular meaning. For me, in my mind, I just use this word bonding. So you strengthen their tie to you, then it makes it easier to discuss something that might be difficult. So Dr. Neufeld uses the example, getting teenagers out of bed in the morning. Do you first say, it's time to get up, you need to get up, you're going to be late for school, you must get up? Or do you first rekindle that relationship with that teenager? Do you first help them, give them an opportunity to reattach to you before you then give them the instruction? And so it's fascinating to listen to Dr. Neufeld's video, because I've been trying this on my own kids. With two teenagers, I have a difficulty getting them out of bed. And one of the things that I've discovered by default, long before I knew about this, was my daughter particularly, she has difficulty sleeping and she has some other anxiety issues. If I give her cat the first thing in the morning, she then feels comforted and she feels loved and she feels encouraged. And if I give her some time with her cat and the fact that I've brought this source of comfort to her, I bring her the cat in the bedroom and then she can spend 10 or 15 minutes with the cat. I always thought it was the cat that was giving her the comfort, and it probably is, but it's also the fact that I am providing her with something that comforts her. Then when I say, come on, honey, it's time to get up, she then is much more receptive. And on days when I can't find the cat, and I say to her, it's time to get up, I can't find your cat, it goes really badly. So this video is about bonding with your child with dysphoria. And really, my point is just for you as parents to think about any moment that you can do to bond with your child, whether it's going for a walk together, whether it's doing something together. Now, I'm not talking about just bonding over things to do with gender dysphoria, but that can be useful to the teenager to understand that you're on their side and you've got their back. So, for example, we've recently had an issue with my daughter's school in relation to school uniforms. And the uniforms, they don't provide an option that is unisex. So they've just changed it now. So they used to have a unisex option and they've moved away from that, and it's either a boy's uniform or a girl's uniform. My daughter identifies as non-binary, which is neither boy nor girl. And so I'm concerned that her dysphoria is going to get worse because she's going to have to choose which uniform to wear. And we had the most incredible bonding moment over this issue to do with uniforms, because I was able to draw her out to explain to me why she thought it was a bad idea from a gender perspective to only have these two choices. And she was explaining to me, even for transgender kids, if they're not out, they could feel more dysphoria if they had to choose between the one or the other, whereas in the unisex uniform, there is not that problem, and they can just relax and not have to worry about gender. So that was an example where we chose, well, I was able to generate a bonding moment. And actually, when we discussed it, there's one issue that I disagreed with my daughter on, and she's done some research, and there's a research that sticks in her mind that says you either have a male brain or a female brain. So you could have a male brain in a female body or a female brain in a male body. Now, that research has been debunked as not being valid, not being correct. She disagrees that it has been debunked. I disagree with the original research. But with that, what we just said, rather than debating that point, I said to her, let's focus on what we do agree on. And it actually turned into such a beautiful moment because there was a lot we could agree on. I didn't think that teenagers should have to choose between these two stereotypically gendered uniforms. So we could agree on that. And so the bonding moment really strengthened our relationship. And then when the relationship is strengthened, it makes it easier to deal with difficult topics, such as binders and things like that. So other examples of bonding would be, well, basically anything you can do to make them feel like you care or you're on their side. And I know it's hard day to day when, you know, they're not doing their chores, they're being oppositional. And if your child is, or your teenager is being oppositional, again, I refer you to Gordon Neufeld video, Dr. Neufeld. He speaks about why teenagers are becoming more oppositional and more anxious. And his view is that it's a lack of attachment. Now, obviously, he's talking about attachment in the psychological sense, but I got the sense that it was very similar to bonding. So if you can establish an emotional connection as often as you can with your child, with your teenager, it doesn't matter what it's in relation to. And how you do that obviously is going to depend on the actual teenager. So it might be, so one thing that I've done to do bonding with my daughter is I have gone into her world a little bit. I've recognized that the gender journey is her journey, not my journey, but I've tried to understand her world. Now, there's a lot of what she watches online that I don't understand and I just completely don't get. But what I've done is I've spoken to her about what she is watching, and it's mainly she watches a lot of anime, that kind of thing. And what I've done is I've selected a couple of the series that I know she really finds enjoyable, and I've taken the time to watch them with her. Now, there've been a couple that I just don't get, and Steven Universe, for example, is a cartoon that I find ridiculous and I can't watch it. And I've said to her, look, that's not my cup of tea. But I found other things, and it's very useful because we can have a private bonding moment. If something happens, we're out at the supermarket, for example, and we see a character acting like one of her characters, one of her favorite characters. She watches Thomas Sanders online, who's a gay YouTuber who talks a lot about the different aspects of personality. And one of the aspects of personality is his anxiety. And he talks about Virgil being the anxiety. He's named it Virgil. And so, you know, if we see somebody in the store who's looking a bit anxious, I can say to her, or she can say to me, oh, that guy's experiencing a Virgil moment. And it's just having that common language that gives us the opportunity to bond. And honestly, this strengthening the relationship has been amazing thanks to the suggestion of Sasha Aid. Sasha also talks about setting boundaries. So part of the strengthening the relationship is setting very firm boundaries. But finding moments to connect or to bond, I have found has been incredible. And it's kind of like, almost like having a car engine that doesn't have any oil in it. It just doesn't run smoothly when the bonding is not there with my teenagers anyway. So once you put oil in the car engine, everything moves together without grinding. So your gears aren't grinding. So I find this, when we have a bit of goodwill, the bonding generates goodwill between the two of us. My teenagers understand that actually I do care. And an interesting thing that Dr. Neufeld said was that the attachment, he's using it in his strictly psychological sense, the attachment lasts only about 2 hours before it has to be renewed. So even though your kids know generally that you love them, he says it's kind of like a hunger in them, and you do need to do things to re-establish that attachment. And he's not talking about physical attachment. He's not talking about just hugging, although of course if the mood is right and you can get a physical embrace, that can help. But he says the effects, there's actually neurological effects. that help um, these kids and the teenagers to bond with you, the neurological effects last only about 2 hours. And it was very interesting that he said that we actually, as humans, are conditioned not to take instructions from somebody that we're not attached to. Apparently, it's, according to Dr. Neufeld, it's a defense mechanism, so that if a stranger gives an instruction to your child or to your teenager, then they won't follow that instruction. And he gives a very good example as a 3-year-old. If you tell a 3-year-old to do something, they might turn around and say to you, "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my mommy." And that's the whole point. The 3-year-old is so immersed in the mother's love, they know and understand instinctively that whatever the mother says is for their best, or that they should be doing it. It's just an instinctive thing. They don't even, they're not even thinking about it. But when they get older and they become teenagers, when you re-establish the bond, then they're receptive to what the parents say. They're receptive to the guidance. They're receptive to different ideas. And with my own daughter, I certainly did not try to convince her that she was transgender or she wasn't transgender. That was not my goal at all. My goal with my daughter was to get her to not close off any of her options, to keep an open mind, and to consider her gender experience as an exploration to see if she truly was transgender, if that really did fit who she actually is. And after 9 months, she decided she's not transgender. Her current gender identity is non-binary. She doesn't feel very comfortable being a boy or being a girl. And so she's moved a far way down the track of understanding, I believed I was transgender, but now I know I'm not. And now she's moved on to the next phase of her growth. So I hope some of that is helpful to some of you, and I wish you all the very best with your gender journeys. If you have not watched my video yet about the part 1 in this series of Alternative to Affirmation, please watch that for some examples of specific gender-related things that I've done with my daughter to help her alleviate that feeling of anxiety, that feeling of dysphoria, and letting her know that I am on her side, even though I don't accept some of the extreme harmful ideas that go with transgender ideas and teenagers. For example, the example I use is I do not want to go down the track of hormones or binding because of the physical dangers to my daughter. So wishing you all the very best and sending you lots of love and luck.